This podcast contains descriptions of violence against children and adult language and is not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, and welcome to Suffer the Little Children, the true crime podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse and shining a harsh spotlight on the parents, guardians, and caretakers who silence them. I'm your host, Laine, and this is episode 94, Case Update Special number 7. In this episode, I'm going to try to speed run through updates on multiple cases I've covered in past episodes. The stories I'll be updating today include those of Kerrigan Rutherford, Max Schollenberger, Nakota Kelly, Averylee Hobbs, Damian Sutton, Dante Mullinix, Judah Morgan, Zaiden Javonovich, Tate Thurman, Thomas Valva, Noah Tomlin, Remi Cowan, and Corey Micciolo. Before I get into today's updates, I'd like to give shout-outs to my newest patrons: Brandy from Newfolden, Minnesota, Jennifer J. from Jacksonville, North Carolina, and Jennifer C. and Natasha J. from Gotham City. Thank you all so much for your support. Now, because I'm trying to get through a ton of case updates today, I'll jump right into it. In episode 31, I told you the story of 6-year-old Kerrigan Rutherford of Montgomery, Illinois, who died on July 2, 2020 from an overdose of her mother's antipsychotic medication. Despite years of DCFS and police involvement due to constant reports of abuse and neglect of Kerri and her younger sister, nothing was done until after Kerri's death. It is unknown if Kerri was force-fed the medication or if she inadvertently consumed the fatal dose herself, as the medication that killed her is available in a form that is sweet and chewable and resembles the little pill-shaped candies that are called Smarties here in America and Rockets back home in Canada. Regardless, her mother and stepfather were arrested, each charged with involuntary manslaughter and endangering the life or health of a child. Both have been housed in the Kendall County Public Safety Center since their arrests. I don't have much to update in Kerri's case other than future court dates. Kerri's stepfather, 30-year-old James Allen Davidson, was seen in court on December 17th, at which time a motion in limine was filed, which basically asks the court to rule in advance about the admissibility of evidence. His next court date, which appears to be a motion hearing, is scheduled for 9 a.m. on February 22, 2022. Kerri's mother, 34-year-old Courtney Ann Davidson, had a court hearing on December 14, 2021. A final trial-setting hearing is scheduled for January 3, 2022 at 10 a.m., and she also has a hearing scheduled at the same time as James's hearing on February 22nd. In episode 32, I discussed the horrific story of 12-year-old Maxwell Schollenberger. On May 26, 2020, police in Annville, Pennsylvania discovered 12-year-old Max's emaciated body in the family's home on South White Oak Street. He was naked, smeared with feces, and slumped across a filthy bed in a dark bedroom with human waste caked on every surface, some of it so old it had begun to grow mold. The bedroom had no lights, and the windows were covered and sealed with duct tape and screws. The door was locked from the outside with metal hooks. The only furniture in the room was the bed on which Max died. At the time of his death, Max weighed 47.5 pounds, about half the average weight of a boy his age. His body had wasted away from malnutrition to the point where he could no longer have digested food. He had also suffered head trauma. His death was ruled a homicide, caused by blunt force trauma complicating starvation/malnutrition. 5 other children who lived in the home were healthy and well-nourished. Very little is known about Max during the last several years of his life. His father and stepmother, Scott Schollenberger and Kimberly Maurer, took Max away from his biological mother when he was about 2 years old and cut off all communication with her and members of Scott's family. Max was never enrolled in school, and the last time he saw a doctor was as a toddler. Scott lied to various people, telling some that Max was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, which was false. Scott and Kim were arrested on September 11, 2020, and charged with homicide, conspiracy to commit homicide, child endangerment by a parent, and conspiracy to commit the same. Both have been held in the Lebanon County Correctional Facility since their arrests. In October of 2021, Max's biological mother, Sarah Kuhn, filed a lawsuit seeking unspecified damages, saying Lebanon County Children and Youth Services could have saved Max if they investigated child abuse reports submitted by his grandparents. Their failure to do so, the lawsuit alleges, was a violation of Max's civil rights. Officials in Lebanon County are apparently seeking to have the lawsuit moved to federal court, as they say Sarah's claims invoke federal law. Scott Fremont Schollenberger, now 43, and Kimberly Marie Maurer, now 37, are scheduled to be seen in court for a call of the list hearing at 8:30 a.m. on March 1, 2022. Their joint jury trial is currently scheduled to begin at 8:30 a.m. on March 14, 2022, before Judge Bradford H. Charles. Episode 33 was dedicated to 10-year-old Nakota Kelly, who is believed to have been murdered by his father, Anthony DeBaya, on July 18, 2020. The gruesome crime scene found in the bathroom of his father's apartment in Indianapolis, Indiana, left police with no doubt that the sweet, funny, caring, energetic boy had tragically and brutally met his end there. Just 4 days before his death, Nakota made a statement to his mother that she immediately relayed to the Department of Child Services. "My dad is going to kill me." Even so, Haley Kelly was forced to hand over her son for that weekend's court-ordered visitation. A day later, Nakota's father called a family member and confessed to murdering his son. Despite Nakota technically remaining missing, Anthony was arrested, charged with murder, and held with no bond. 38-year-old Anthony DeBaya has been held in Marion County Jail since his arrest. There have been a number of delays in the court proceedings, but as of right now, his jury trial is scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. on January 24, 2022, before Judge Shatrice M. Flowers in Marion Superior Court 28. It breaks my heart to report that Nakota's body still has not been found. The next group of updates concerns the subject of episodes 47 and 48, 4-year-old Averylee Hobbs, who took her last breath in a Cincinnati, Ohio hospital on August 1, 2016, after 3 days on life support. Despite her mother's claims that she drowned in the bathtub, Avery had actually received a catastrophic brain injury. An autopsy determined that Avery had suffered bruises and abrasions on virtually every part of her body, multiple hemorrhages in the brain, both eyes, and both optic nerves, trauma to her genitals, and abdominal injuries. There were also signs that 4-year-old Avery had been starved, and chunks of her hair had been hacked off. Avery's mother, Brittany Mays, had previously spent time in prison for fracturing her daughter's skull as an infant. Despite multiple family members attempting to gain custody of Avery to prevent her mother from further harming her daughter, the woman was granted custody. She was later convicted of the murder of the same little girl everyone fought so hard to protect. Avery's story is one of the most egregious failures of Child Protective Services and the family court system that I've ever heard. Shortly after I covered Avery's story on the podcast, in February of 2021, Brittany May's appeal of her conviction was denied. Her sentence was modified from 20 years to life with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Her first parole hearing will take place in June of 2036. Brittany apparently now fancies herself an attorney. She still claims she is innocent and has been unjustly imprisoned despite the mountains of irrefutable evidence against her. In August of this year, almost exactly 5 years after their marriage, Brittany filed for divorce from her husband, Charles Mays III, with a child dependent. Interestingly, according to Ohio law, if you want to be considered to receive any marital property or alimony, you have to be married for a minimum of 5 years. Brittany, whom many believe to be a stone-cold psychopath, has since strategically filed a restraining order against Charles, likely to make it appear she was abused by yet another man. She also managed to have all of her sentences combined to run concurrently, which effectively shortens her prison time by 6 months. Despite strong suspicions, Charles has never been charged in connection with Avery's abuse or death. In episode 48, I was privileged to speak with Avery's paternal grandmother, Tammy Risen, who raised the little girl she called her Cupcake for most of Avery's life and who Avery called Mama. Tammy is a tremendous force who tried everything possible to save her granddaughter's life, and now she's dedicated to making changes to protect other children in similar situations. Tammy is active in her Facebook group, DEAR, Developing Essential Advocate Restoration for Abused Children, frequently updating her followers on her efforts to make real changes to benefit abused children. I'll include a link to the group in the show notes for this episode, and I highly recommend everyone visit and join the group. Tammy is truly a force to be reckoned with, and in her own words, a granny with a mission. This year, on justiceforavery.org, a website she created to tell Avery's story, Tammy created a page dedicated to victims who have been failed by the system. Unable to pursue criminal prosecution, Tammy filed a grievance with the State of Ohio Licensing Board against multiple people she feels bear some responsibility for Avery's death, hoping to go after their licenses. Her grievance against the court's magistrate and judge was immediately dismissed. Next, she filed one against the state guardian and social worker, but that went nowhere because JFS was not willing to release the case files and said they saw no cause for the family to make such a claim. If you've heard episodes 47 and 48, you know that's blatantly untrue. Tammy's third attempted grievance was against Avery's state guardian, which was also denied. Next, she got the state to agree that Avery's therapist should also be investigated. It took 6 months of interviews, evidence collection, and multiple attempts to open the agency's file. They claimed Avery was not their patient, but they changed their tune when Tammy provided a 20-email chain of correspondence as evidence, and they miraculously found Avery's file. However, it only contained a handful of documents indicating the therapist was concerned about the mother's treatment of Avery. Everything else had disappeared, including emails, documents, and an illegal psychological evaluation that was done on Tammy without her knowledge. In August of 2021, the head of the licensing council told Tammy there was more than enough evidence to move forward with the grievance. However, on September 22nd, which would have been Avery's 10th birthday, Tammy got a letter from the State of Ohio Licensing Board saying they didn't have enough evidence to prove negligence on the part of the therapist. Nonetheless, Tammy hasn't stopped fighting. She's currently working on writing a second edition of her book, In the Best Interest of a Child, which is available on Amazon. In October, Tammy posted about her son, Avery's father, Jamie Hobbs, who was struggling with his mental health. All the years hit him like a wall, and he is suffering. He has reached out for professional help, and I pray for him. When we lose children, it is hard enough that it be by illness or an accident. But those that lose children by issues that could have been prevented, I feel, are the hardest ones to recover from. I want to tell you that however you feel, mourn, break apart, act erratically, and so on, it is okay. It is okay because no one ever handed us a handbook on how to recover from such tragedies. I also want to say that it is acceptable that you find happiness. You don't have to live a life of misery and dismay. We have to think about the people we lost. Did they want us to be this miserable? Or did they love us enough to want us to be happy? On that note, this year, Tammy and the family put up their first Christmas tree since their nightmare with the Hamilton County Department of Jobs and Family Services began. She posted photos of the beautiful tree in the Facebook group, along with the comment, "Change has no set time, nor healing. It comes when it comes." In episodes 52 and 53, I told you the story of 2-year-old Damian Sutton, who was rushed to the Children's Hospital in Detroit, Michigan on August 21, 2013 with severe head trauma. As the little boy clung to life, police interviewed Ronald DeMambro Jr., the man with whom Damian and his mom, Nikki, lived. Nikki was not dating Ron, but because she had nowhere else to stay, she pretended they were a couple so Ron's parents would allow her and Damian to live with them. Ron told numerous stories about how Damian's injuries occurred, but authorities believe Ron violently shook the toddler, severely injuring Damian's brain. Damian remained on life support for several days, during which part of his skull was removed to reduce the pressure on his brain. On August 27, 2013, he was taken off life support, and at 7:41 a.m. the same day, Damian died in his mommy's arms. After 2 trials, Ron DeMambro Jr. was ultimately convicted in January of 2020 on charges of first-degree murder and first-degree child abuse. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 15 to 25 additional years. In April of 2021, Ron filed a motion for yet another new trial, which fortunately was denied in July. Enduring 2 trials was traumatizing enough for Damian's family, and I can't imagine what a third trial would cost them mentally and emotionally. Disgraced former prosecutor Eric Smith, who originally prosecuted Ron DeMambro Jr., was later criminally charged with misconduct, embezzlement, and forgery in an unrelated case, accused of misusing state forfeiture funds. In January of 2021, Mr. Smith pleaded guilty to a federal charge of obstruction. Beginning in July, his preliminary examination was held in Mount Clemens District Court for his state charges, continuing through October. If he is found guilty of the state charges, he could face up to 20 years in prison. For his federal obstruction plea, he was scheduled to be sentenced in November, but he sought an adjournment. His federal sentencing is now scheduled for January 13, 2022. Dante Mullinix was the subject of episodes 76 and 77. Dante had some developmental disabilities, was slow to learn to walk, and was nonverbal, using only a few small words. While he never received a formal diagnosis, it is believed Dante was likely on the autism spectrum. On September 6, 2018, Dante was taken to the hospital, unresponsive, after his mom's boyfriend said he choked on animal crackers. After several days on life support, Dante died on September 15th, just a week before his 3rd birthday. His death was ruled a homicide caused by traumatic brain injury with strangulation and chest compression. He also suffered significant bruising on his face, scalp, neck, and body, a subdural hematoma, hemorrhaging inside his neck, and, inexplicably, an active HSV-2 or herpes infection. Children and Youth Services in York County, Pennsylvania, had contact with Dante and his mother, Leah Mullinix, 4 days before his final hospitalization. Despite a concerned nurse advocating for Dante to be removed from his mother's care, CYS marked him as safe, thereby sealing his fate. Leah's boyfriend, 40-year-old Tyree Bowie, was charged with Dante's murder, although many believe he is innocent. One important factor in that belief is that Tyree does not have herpes. He is currently being held with no bail in the York County Jail awaiting trial, which is currently scheduled to begin in May of 2022. Leah Mullinix was charged with child endangerment for failing to obtain medical care for her son while he suffered from swelling and painful ulcers on his genitals in the days leading up to his hospitalization. Right now, she is free on bail. Her next court date is a status hearing scheduled for February 8, 2022. In March of 2021, Dante's aunt, Sarah Mullinix, was charged with 2 counts of unauthorized release of information, a misdemeanor crime with a maximum sentence of 1 to 2 years in prison. This charge stemmed from York City Police investigating Sarah's Facebook page, Justice for Dante, where she has posted many photos, screenshots, and details about the case, including pictures of medical and CYS documents she was provided by Tyree, who obtained the information through the discovery process in his case. Sarah strongly feels Tyree is innocent. The Pennsylvania law used to charge Sarah was obviously intended to prevent government employees with access to confidential databases from releasing sensitive information, and experts examined the charge from all angles. The law has only been applied twice in the past decade, Sarah being the second, the first being a Bradford County CYS worker who accidentally disclosed confidential information over the phone. Judge Craig Treblecock was intrigued by the First Amendment implications of the law being applied to Sarah and took over the case. In September of 2021, not long after my episodes were released, the judge dismissed the charges against Sarah, whose legal name is Sarah Mercado, but who goes by her maiden name of Mullinix. A week before, the York County District Attorney's Office had offered to drop the charges on the condition that Sarah never again post CYS documents online, which was, of course, unacceptable. Both Sarah and her mother, Victoria, have filed lawsuits against the York County District Attorney's Office and the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Office, seeking injunctions allowing them to post CYS documents about Dante's case without fear of prosecution. Sarah has also filed a lawsuit against York County Judge Snyder, who is overseeing the case against Tyree Bowie. After Sarah's charges were dismissed, her attorney, Brandy Hoke, said, "We all just want justice for Dante and need to focus on getting that. Sarah and I very much appreciate all the support that has been shown to us over the past few months." One final update in Dante's case is a heartwarming one. A page called Dante Mullinix's Angel Tree, which was jointly created by Sarah, held a donation drive accepting toys, clothing items, electronics, gift cards, wrapping supplies, food, and Christmas candy for local children in need, especially victims of child abuse and domestic violence. Sarah told me they completely fulfilled the wish lists of 21 children in Dante's memory this year. Sarah continues to advocate for justice for her precious nephew, who lived with her for the majority of his short life, as well as for Tyree Bowie, who she strongly believes is innocent of the charges against him. I'll include a link to her Justice for Dante page in the show notes. Episodes 87 and 88 featured the story of 4-year-old Judah Morgan, who was removed from his parents' custody as an infant and spent almost his whole life in the stable, loving foster home of his second cousin, Gina Hullett, and her family. Due to apparent mistakes made by the Indiana Department of Child Services, which essentially forgot to terminate the parental rights of Judah's biological parents, the little boy was returned to the Hamlet, Indiana home of Alan Morgan and Mary Yoder in April of 2021. Despite warnings to DCS by concerned family members, Judah remained in the home for 6 months until, on October 11, 2021, he was found dead on the floor of a bedroom in Alan and Mary's home with blunt force trauma injuries to his head. Evidence shows that Judah was punished by being restrained with duct tape in the family's basement, naked, where the lights were turned off as a scare tactic against the terrified little boy. Both 28-year-old Alan Dale Morgan and 26-year-old Mary Elizabeth Yoder were arrested the same day and booked into LaPorte County Jail. Alan faces multiple charges, including felony murder, 2 counts of 5th-degree felony neglect of a dependent, 3 6th-degree felony counts of neglect of a dependent, felony resisting law enforcement, and cruelty to an animal due to an emaciated dog being rescued from a crate in the home. Mary was charged with 1st-degree felony neglect of a dependent resulting in death, 5th-degree felony neglect of a dependent, and 2 misdemeanors, including cruelty to an animal and failure to make a report. Alan is being held with no bond, while Mary's cash bond was set at $100,005. A bond hearing for Mary is scheduled to take place at 8:30 a.m. on January 7, 2022. I'll provide a link in the show notes to a Change.org petition demanding Mary's charges be upgraded to murder and her bail be revoked. Recently, Gina Hullett was interviewed for a news segment by 13 WTHR, which I'll also link to in the show notes.
Just everything's a constant reminder. Dandelions. He would squat down and pick up the dandelion. He called me mommy, called my husband daddy. My kids were his siblings. He liked to dance. He loved to dance. It's very, very sweet and loving up until he would have visits and then he would come home angry. I'm screaming for help and nobody's listening. Oh, every time he'd come home from a visit, he'd tell me, take off your shoes, mommy. He knew if my shoes were off, we weren't going anywhere. He wasn't going to visit. We were staying at home. He would scream and they would have to pry him off of me because he did not want to go to visit. And then it went from 3 days a week to just completely ripped him from us, put him with them, and we weren't allowed to visit him. So in my eyes, he was probably scared. Didn't understand why we dropped him off there and never came back. I was mourning him then, but I always had hope that we would see him again. I even told my husband I'm going to start writing him letters so when he gets older, I want him to know that we always loved him. Only the other thing I can do is try to make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else. I'm tired of hearing about the system failing children and babies, and nobody should have to bury their child, and although I didn't give birth to him, he was my baby. I'm having such an overwhelming amount of stress that I'm only doing this because I want awareness for other children. I want justice for Judah. It's the only way that I can pay him back, is to try to get justice for him, because it didn't have to happen. It shouldn't have happened. He was happy with us.
I highly recommend following the Justice for Judah Morgan group on Facebook, which I'll also link. Gina and her youngest daughter, Madison, frequently post the sweetest, most adorable pictures and videos of Judah, who was just bursting with personality. His real family, the Hulletts, are now preparing for their first Christmas without him. Immediately after Judah's death, Gina began pushing for changes to the laws designed to protect children, and she hasn't stopped pushing since. Recently, Indiana Senator J.D. Ford met with the Hulletts and filed a bill for the 2022 legislative session inspired by Judah. A benefit lunch and candlelight vigil in Judah's honor were held on December 4th. 100% of the proceeds went to the Judah Morgan Fund, which was set up to help raise awareness of child abuse and neglect, and to raise awareness of the unjust verdicts of our court system, who continue to put innocent children back into the hands of their abusers. 2-year-old Zaiden Javonovich was the subject of episode 64 of this podcast. I've been following Zaiden's story since it broke 2.5 years ago. On April 11, 2019, a neighbor's 911 call about a domestic dispute summoned police in Wichita, Kansas, to the mobile home of Patrick Javonovich and Brandy Marchant. When police checked on the couple's children, they were horrified at what they found. 4-month-old Ty was alive in his crib, though battered, suffering from severe diaper rash, and severely malnourished, weighing only 8 pounds. In a playpen, another officer located 2-year-old Zaiden, face down in what appeared to be vomit. He was tightly swaddled in a blanket, and his skin was cold to the touch and discolored. He wore footy pajamas with a zipper in front, but his arms were trapped inside the garment, and the loose sleeves had been tied in a knot at his throat. Zaiden, who was also severely malnourished and weighed not quite 15 pounds, was pronounced dead just after midnight on April 12, 2019. Zaiden's autopsy uncovered horrific details. His cause of death was dehydration and malnutrition. He also suffered from blunt force trauma to his face and head, and methamphetamine was found in his system. Early decomposition noted in the autopsy report suggested that Zaiden had been dead for hours or even days before his body was discovered. 26-year-old Patrick Robert Javonovich and 22-year-old Brandy Kai Marchant were arrested and booked into the Sedgwick County Jail on 5 charges each, including first-degree murder with underlying felonies of neglect and abuse, 2 counts of abuse of a child, and aggravated endangerment of a child. During the summer of 2019, Patrick was attacked in jail by another inmate and required brain surgery for his injuries. He was temporarily deemed incompetent to stand trial, but fortunately, in January of 2021, he was found competent. In August of 2021, Brandy was charged with a 2nd count of child endangerment for her treatment of baby Ty, accused of starving him. An evidentiary hearing was held on October 20th for the new charge. At the state's request, her jury trial was rescheduled from October to January 24, 2022. Patrick's trial is scheduled to begin on January 10, 2022. In November of this year, baby Ty turned 3, and he appears to be happy, healthy, and thriving with his biological dad, Julius. Episode 71 was devoted to the story of 4-year-old Tate Thurman. Tate's father, Remi Thurman, was at work the morning of February 18, 2020, when Tate was critically injured while alone in the care of Remi's live-in girlfriend, Leslie Jett. Tate's 7-year-old brother had already boarded the school bus, and Leslie's 2-year-old son was still sleeping when Leslie made a panicked 911 call, telling the dispatcher that Tate was unresponsive. She later told police Tate had slipped in a puddle of water and fallen on the kitchen floor. Tate was rushed to the hospital in cardiac arrest, covered head to toe with vicious bruises and serious injuries. Even after 2 attempted life-saving surgeries, Tate never regained consciousness. On February 20th, he was removed from life support and died from his injuries. His autopsy revealed intestinal tears caused by high-velocity blunt force trauma, as well as a pancreatic hematoma that caused internal bleeding. Leslie was arrested on multiple charges and held in Tazewell County Jail on a $3 million bond. After a 2-week trial, Leslie was convicted in July of 2021 by a jury that deliberated for just 80 minutes of first-degree murder with intent to kill or cause great bodily harm to a child under 12, first-degree murder with the knowledge that her acts bore the strong probability of death or great harm, and aggravated battery to a child under 12. Now onto the update. 35-year-old Leslie Ann Jett was sentenced as scheduled in Illinois' Tazewell County Court on September 17, 2021. At the beginning of the hearing, the defense requested a new trial, which the judge quickly denied. Wearing a black and white striped jail jumpsuit, Leslie sat stoically at the defense table while the prosecution asserted, as they did during her trial, that Leslie grew more and more frustrated and resentful about being forced to care for Jeremy's 2 sons, especially Tate, who she claimed was inconsistent with potty training and had frequent accidents. The prosecuting attorneys relentlessly presented evidence during the hearing, including Leslie's text to friends, as well as testimony from cell phone and drug experts about a 2-year amphetamine addiction that caused Leslie to become increasingly hateful and cold-hearted. Leslie was essentially emotionless during the 5-hour court proceeding. Her only reaction to speak of was an audible but unintelligible yelp while the prosecution, led by Assistant State's Attorneys Mara Mishler and Sarah Schreier, discussed the 260 injuries found during Tate's autopsy. As Leslie pulled off her face mask and wiped tears from her face, Judge Paul Gilfillan chided her about refraining from outbursts and reminded her that she would be allowed to address the court before receiving her sentence. Presenting over 60 pages of text messages, Mara Mishler described Leslie's worsening behavior as she bought, sold, and used Adderall and other prescription amphetamines, getting high on the drugs and staying awake all night, then remaining exhausted and furious all day while tasked with caring for Tate. Leslie often mocked Tate, calling him a baby for being excited when his daddy got home at dinner time. She also tormented Tate by withholding toys and food if his behavior didn't meet her impossible standards. Ms. Mishler told the court, "The defendant is manipulative, dishonest, untrustworthy, parasitic, cold, self-centered, and cruel." According to Michael Stewart, the probation officer who conducted Leslie's pre-sentencing investigation, Leslie's blood revealed a high level of methamphetamines when tested on February 19, 2020, the day after Tate was taken to the hospital. Tate's maternal grandfather, Doug Kent, told the court his grandson was an engaging and energetic boy who loved to dance, play, and laugh. Frowning at Leslie, Doug said, "Tate was such a good little boy and loved by all, I thought." In this situation, Doug said, "There were no winners, only losers," adding that he missed Tate terribly. "He was my little buddy and always will be." Remi Thurman sobbed breathlessly during his victim impact statement, remembering what he thought was a happy home. "As I'm providing for my family, she was hurting my son while I was at work." He said that at night, Leslie seemed loving and he never suspected she was abusing his son. "All the while she was hiding malicious behavior. I have struggled to come to terms knowing I will never hear Tate say, 'Daddy, I love you.'" Calling his ex-girlfriend a threat to society, Remi told the court he has been diagnosed with severe PTSD since his son's murder. Remi's aunt, Julie Runyon, said their family would never be the same thanks to the actions of Leslie Jett, who she called an evil person. "I always think about how she made him suffer. I don't know how my nephew is ever going to get through this." Another witness at the sentencing hearing was Eugenia Small, the grandmother of Leslie's own son, whose testimony implied Tate was not the only child in the household who was abused. After Tate died, Leslie's son went to live with Eugenia, who said he had nutritional, speech, and dental issues. The little boy, who required 3 rotten teeth to be pulled, recoiled in fear when she would wipe his privates. He slept all day and stayed up all night, Eugenia testified. One morning, he started hitting himself in the stomach, saying, "Stop, Mom, stop, it hurts." Fortunately, the little boy has developed healthier sleeping habits, and his speech and nutritional patterns have also improved since being in his grandmother's care. Leslie's defense team, attorneys Michael Brandt and Hugh Toner, submitted over 40 letters to the judge from Leslie's friends and family members, who described her as a decent, kind person who adored children. Asking the judge to give heavy weight to the letters, Brandt said many of the allegations made by the prosecution lacked solid evidence and, of the letters, added, "These folks are genuine." Leslie opted not to address the court. Instead, she merely submitted a letter to the judge, who read it but did not reveal its contents, merely alluding to her lack of remorse before handing down her sentence. "The fact that she's not showing remorse doesn't necessarily help her here today." Judge Gilfillan spoke of Leslie's egregious behavior toward Tate. "She seemed to be a horrible pseudo-parent for Tate, even before February 18, 2020 rolled around." In Illinois, the sentencing range for first-degree murder is normally from 20 to 60 years, but when the victim is under 12 years old, the convicted can face up to 100 years. Fortunately, seeing through her defense's attempts to paint her as a saint, Judge Gilfillan sentenced Leslie to 75 years in prison, with 18 months credit for time served. By state statute, she is required to serve 100% of her sentence, so she will not be eligible for release until she is about 108 years old, after which she is set to receive 3 years of supervision. My guess is she won't live to see that day, and Leslie Ann Jett will spend the rest of her life exactly where she belongs, suffering behind bars. In November, Leslie was transferred from the Tazewell County Jail to Logan Correctional Center in Lincoln, Illinois. Her prison photo is the most hilarious example of a poor me mugshot I've ever seen, and I actually laughed out loud when I saw it. I'll definitely include it in the Facebook photo album for this episode. Way back in episodes 5 and 6, I told you about 8-year-old Thomas Valva, whose story is one of the most egregious cases of multiple child abuse, family court corruption, CPS failure, and narcissistic abuse I've ever heard, let alone told. Thomas and his brothers, Anthony and Andrew, were unjustly yanked from their loving mother's custody in 2017 and given to their father, Michael Valva, an NYPD police officer who lived with his fiancée, Angela Polina, and her 3 daughters. Justina Zubko Valva did not see her sons for 2 years prior to Tommy's death. The couple's home on Long Island, New York, was truly a house of horrors. Thomas and Anthony, both of whom were autistic, were abused worst due to their special needs. The 2 boys were malnourished and often begged for food at school, even rummaging for food in the trash cans. From 2018 to 2019, state and county child protection hotlines received 20 calls from school staff reporting absences, a black eye, lacerations, hunger, visible dirt on the body, and urine-soaked clothing. Despite multiple reports, the children were never removed from the Valva Polina home. On the evening of January 16, 2020, as punishment for some real or imagined transgression, Tommy and Anthony were forced to sleep in the unheated garage attached to the family home on a night when temperatures in Center Moriches reached an overnight low of 19 degrees Fahrenheit. The boys slept on the bare concrete floor, huddled together with no blankets, pillows, or extra clothing to shield them from the cold. The following morning, Tommy was found unresponsive. He was rushed to Long Island Community Hospital, where he was pronounced dead with a core temperature of 76 degrees. His death was ruled a homicide, with a major contributing factor of hypothermia. Michael Valva and Angela Polina were both arrested and charged with second-degree murder and child endangerment. The boy's mother, Justina, has since filed a $200 million wrongful death lawsuit against officials in Suffolk County and school representatives, alleging that Tommy was abused physically, mentally, and sexually, allegations she has made for years, even prior to Tommy's death. Her surviving boys are now where they belong, in Justina's loving arms. Even though detectives have obtained extremely damning video and audio recordings from within the Valva home, both defendants have pleaded not guilty. In August, Suffolk County Supreme Court Justice William Condon, who will oversee the trial, ruled that key video evidence and other physical evidence would be admissible during trial. These items included a Nest camera, a Ring doorbell video, and a bag of Thomas's clothing, which defense attorneys claimed were obtained illegally by police and should be suppressed. They had also argued that police didn't get the couple's permission to search the home, nor a warrant beforehand. According to a September ruling by Judge Condon, Michael Valva and Angela Polina will be tried together, but by 2 separate juries. Later in September, their trial, which was scheduled to begin October 12th, was postponed until January 10, 2022, due to tightening pandemic protocols enacted after the Delta variant came on the scene. In episode 10, I told you the story of autistic 2-year-old Noah Tomlin, who was reported missing from the family's mobile home in Hampton, Virginia, by his mother, Julia, on June 24, 2019. Despite a huge multi-agency search, Noah was not located alive, and soon afterward, Julia told police he drowned in the bathtub when she was high on heroin. Julia was arrested on 3 counts of felony child neglect. In early July of 2019, Noah's partial remains were found in the Hampton landfill and steam plant, after which Julia was charged with additional crimes, including second-degree murder, concealing a dead body, and child abuse. An autopsy determined that Noah's death was caused by savage, blunt force trauma. In July of 2020, after an evaluation, Julia Tomlin was ruled fit to stand trial, and her subsequent request for bond was also denied. She has been held in the Hampton Roads Regional Jail since her arrest. Now for a huge update. On December 14, 2021, almost 2.5 years since Noah's death, 37-year-old Julia Leanna Tomlin acknowledged in court that she killed Noah, pleading guilty to second-degree murder, felony child neglect, and concealing a dead body. The prosecution opted not to pursue several other child neglect charges against Julia, but Hampton Commonwealth's attorney Anton Bell told reporters there was no plea agreement.
Julia Tomlin pled as she has been charged. She has always been charged with second-degree murder. She was never charged with first-degree murder because first-degree murder requires premeditation, and the evidence never could be shown or proven that it was premeditated what she did. And as such, she was charged with second degree, which carries a 5 to 40 years maximum sentence. 55 altogether with the concealing of a deceased body and with the felony child neglect, which resulted in serious bodily injury. Altogether, it's 55 years that she is facing. She was also charged with 3 counts of abuse and neglect because she was, according to her statement, high on heroin when this incident took place. And as such, she was initially charged with that. However, upon further research and looking into the case law does not support a conviction for that charge based on just a parent being intoxicated or high or under the influence. And so I couldn't go forth on that even if I was trying the case. So those charges were going away regardless. I don't really call this case justice. I would call it accountability, because justice to me puts you back into the same place you were prior to the incident or to the crime. And I don't think you could ever be put back into that situation, because this community mourned and is still mourning the loss of Noah. This community, if you remember, were out for days, all over a week, scouring this city looking for him. We had neighbors, strangers, people coming from out of state coming here looking for this 2-year-old. And to find out that all along this 2-year-old had died horrifically at the hands of the mother, who had given a story that the child had drowned and that we were all looking for this child, and this child is in a steam plant. And if you remember, that was one of the hottest summers that we had ever experienced. And so the body was decomposing at the very time that everybody's looking, hoping this child's going to be alive, and the child is gone. And so I can't really say that it brings complete closure, but what it does is it's the first step in the right direction for true accountability. And we're going to be asking the court to give the maximum punishment based on her history and based on what she did on that particular day and during that week to this child. It's hard to stomach. And then you guys didn't get the opportunity to see the photos, but the photos are extremely hard to look at. We're talking about extreme abuse here. Imagine a baby with missing limbs, missing body parts, and a skull with just a few hair strings. There was blood on the wall, there was blood on his sheets, there was blood on his t-shirt. The injuries were likened to someone falling several stories from a building.
Julia's sentencing hearing is scheduled to take place on March 18, 2022. Episode 23 of the podcast featured the story of 16-week-old Remi Cowan, who passed away in her daddy's arms on June 7, 2019, after several hours on life support. Remi was fatally injured while in the care of a babysitter, Megan Borges, who failed to mention she was on methadone and apparently passed out with the baby, who asphyxiated. Megan has never been prosecuted or even investigated in connection with Remi's death, despite a great deal of evidence pointing to her negligence, and despite the strong opinion of the medical examiner who conducted Remi's autopsy that the baby's death should be examined by the Pennsylvania Child Fatality Review Board. Even after receiving a petition with nearly 1,600 signatures demanding Remi's death receive a thorough investigation, or any investigation at all, Lycoming County, Pennsylvania District Attorney Ryan Gardner refuses to acknowledge the suspicious nature of Remi's death, to hold accountable the person responsible, and to obtain justice for the Cowan family and their beloved baby girl. Remi's mom, Ashley Cowan, runs a nonprofit organization called Remi's Purpose, which helps families who can't afford to give their deceased loved ones a proper send-off. She's working on obtaining grants to assist more people in need. Ashley, her husband Matt, and their 3 surviving daughters struggle with Remi's loss every day, and it's only exacerbated by the fact that there has been no justice for Remi. I have one small update today regarding Remi's story, and unfortunately, it doesn't equate to progress in Remi's actual case. Instead, it further proves the character of her former babysitter. Surprising exactly no one, 40-year-old Megan Borges was arrested on October 28, 2021, and booked into Lycoming County Prison on 4 felony charges of delivery of a controlled substance after being accused of selling methamphetamine to an informant and undercover police officers over the course of 4 separate incidents in February and March of this year. The sales took place in Muncie Township, although Megan's address was listed in court documents as both Williamsport and Montoursville. District Judge Christian Frey set Megan's bail at $15,000, but she was able to post bail and was released. Her preliminary hearing was scheduled for January 25, 2022, but it appears that on December 7th, her attorney, Howard Gold, filed a waiver of that hearing. Megan was also served with a summons on 2 other charges, possession of a controlled substance and drug paraphernalia, stemming from an undisclosed October incident. Her preliminary hearing on those charges is scheduled for January 6, 2022 at 3:15 p.m. How ridiculous is it that this woman, for whom jail is nothing but a revolving door, will likely end up being punished more severely for drug charges than for negligently causing the death of a helpless baby in her care? To this day, there has been no in-depth investigation into Remi's death. In episode 69, I featured the story of 6-year-old Corey Micciolo, who died on April 2, 2021, while in the care of his father, Christopher Gregor. Christopher wanted nothing to do with his son until Corey's mother, Brianna Micciolo, applied for child support when Corey was 5 years old. Immediately after Corey's visits with Christopher began, Corey began returning home to Brianna with suspicious injuries, including bruises, rug burn-like injuries, and a split lip. Despite Brianna's frequent reports to New Jersey's Division of Child Protection and Permanency, Christopher's unsupervised visits with Corey continued, and so did Corey's injuries. On April 1, 2021, Corey disclosed at a doctor appointment that his father had caused his various bruises and other injuries by hitting him. One of the bruises was so severe that the doctor ordered a chest X-ray to ensure no bones were broken. The same day, Brianna applied online for an emergency order giving her full custody pending the outcome of a DCP&P investigation, but hours later, she received an email saying the emergency order was denied. The following day, Brianna was forced to drop Corey off for a scheduled visit at Christopher's home in Barnegat, New Jersey. That afternoon, Christopher called her, saying he was taking Corey to the hospital and needed his insurance information. He refused to give any further details or to tell Brianna which hospital they were going to. Brianna called the police, who soon received a call from staff at the Southern Ocean Medical Center in Manahawkin. Around 5:30 p.m. the same day, Brianna received the unthinkable news that Corey was dead. While Corey fought for life in the hospital, it turned out, Christopher fled the state. He was ultimately located in Tennessee and immediately demanded an attorney. When I spoke with Brianna for episode 69, no charges had been filed in connection with the abuse or murder of her little boy, who was conceived when 16-year-old Brianna was raped by Christopher Gregor. The day after the episode was released, on Thursday, July 8, 2021, authorities issued a warrant for the arrest of 29-year-old Christopher John Gregor on a single charge under New Jersey Law 2C-24-4A, endangering the welfare of children by a person having the legal duty of caring for the child. In this case, the child endangerment charge is a second-degree crime. The following day, Christopher turned himself in and was booked into the Ocean County Jail. However, this charge had nothing to do with Corey's death. Instead, according to court and law enforcement documents obtained by Jersey Shore Online, it stemmed from an incident that took place on March 20th at the gym in Christopher's apartment complex. A preliminary law enforcement incident report and affidavit of probable cause signed by Barnegat Police Detective William Hetrick describes how security footage captured Christopher and Corey entering the Atlantic Heights apartment complex clubhouse at around 4:17 p.m. Corey began running on the treadmill and Christopher cranked up the speed. When Corey was unable to keep up and fell off the treadmill, Christopher picked him up, placed him back on the moving treadmill, and, according to the police document, appears to bite Corey on the head. Corey then fell off the treadmill again, falling each time he tried to get back on the moving belt, over and over. Brianna told me Corey suffered from severe rug burn-like injuries after the incident. Christopher told her that Corey was too fat and frequently forced him to exercise, which is a common form of child abuse that we've seen in multiple previous cases. Multiple women have come forward since Brianna began telling her story, all of them claiming horrific physical and emotional abuse at the hands of Christopher Gregor. Most were not comfortable making their names public or even having the details of their stories printed out of fear of retaliation by Christopher, who many believe is an entitled narcissist with severe anger issues and a pathological hatred of women. One woman told a reporter, "Chris and I dated between 2014 and 2016. We met when I was 17, almost 18, and I believe he was 21, and we moved in together very quickly. Soon after we moved in together, he started physically abusing me, from small things like grabbing my arms to huge things like stabbing with a car key. I constantly was hiding bruises. While I was still 18, I got pregnant. We planned on keeping the baby, yet it only took a couple of weeks for him to be back to hitting me. I felt I had no choice but to have an abortion. I couldn't bring a child into that situation to subject them to Chris. Chris has hurt so many people, women and friends before me, women and friends after me. He manipulates and lies with more ease than anyone I've met. He is charming at first, then more evil and vile than you can imagine. The same former girlfriend of Christopher's also said, Chris used to heavily suggest skipping meals to avoid gaining weight. A lot of the focus is on him making Corey run because he believed he was fat, and that rings true based on my experience with him. In a press release on July 12th, Ocean County Prosecutor Bradley D. Billheimer announced Christopher's charges and arrest, stating, On April 2nd, officers from the Stafford Township Police Department responded to Southern Ocean Medical Center in Manahawkin in reference to the death of a 6-year-old male. In the course of investigating the child's death, detectives from the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office Major Crime Unit and Ocean County Prosecutor's Office High-Tech Crime Squad came into possession of evidence revealing that Gregor committed acts of abuse against the child in Barnegat Township on March 20th, 2021. On July 9th, Gregor surrendered himself to the Barnegat Township Police Department. Christopher has not been charged in connection with Corey's death, although Prosecutor Billheimer emphasized in the press release that the death of the child remains an ongoing investigation. In April, even before he was charged and before Corey's cause of death was determined, Christopher retained Staten Island criminal defense attorney Mario Gallucci, whose website touts him as one of the National Trial Lawyers Top 100. His website also mentions that Gallucci will consider all potential angles of defense in order to create the most effective strategy. So, like most criminal defense attorneys, he's willing to lie to get his client off, no matter how reprehensible an individual he represents. Gallucci told New Jersey Advance Media after Christopher's arrest that his client denies all allegations against him. Mr. Gregor has been aware of this investigation for several months. My office has and continues to do an independent investigation, which includes the retention of a forensic expert. Submitting himself as both a liar and a slimeball of the highest order, Gallucci told News 12, Mr. Gregor was given full legal and physical custody on 1/28/20 over the child's mother because the court at that time found her to be unable to care for the child. Although we are aware of an incident that occurred on March 20th, 2021, our investigation reveals no link between the tragic death of the infant and the 3/20 incident. As a matter of fact, immediately prior to the infant's death, he was visiting with the mother, and it was my client who took the infant to the emergency room after the infant was returned to him from the mother. The child was taken to the emergency room because he was lethargic and not eating, which prompted Mr. Gregor to take the child to the hospital. Our medical examiner expert will be reviewing the ME report, and when appropriate, we will reveal his opinion. I believe once the truth is revealed in this case as to the relationship the mother and her family had with this child, my client will be completely vindicated. Just a brief pause to interject. Who the hell calls an almost 7-year-old child an infant? Only halfway through the statement did Gallucci switch to the word child. Also, according to Brianna, Gallucci's statement about Christopher being given full custody in January is a flat-out lie. As for the statement about the relationship between Corey and his mom's family, one only needs to look as far as DCP&P's involvement with Corey to know the truth. Not once prior to his father being granted unsupervised visitation with Corey was any suspicion whatsoever raised that Corey was being abused or neglected. Corey lived the first 5 years of his life happy, carefree, and unafraid. Only when his so-called father entered his life did Corey start turning up with unexplained injuries that he ultimately disclosed were caused by Christopher. What does that tell you? Gallucci also added that Christopher had made numerous reports to DCP&P against Brianna. However, Brianna's family attorney, Christopher Conrad, told Jersey Shore Online, My client was never charged with child abuse. She knows of no complaints made against her accusing her of hurting Corey. Conrad added that the most recent custody order between Brianna and Christopher was a shared order dated in October of 2020. But wait, it gets worse. Gallucci told Jersey Shore Online that on April 2nd, when his client left the hospital and fled the state, he didn't leave the child. He did go to Tennessee, but that was after the child had passed. His going to Tennessee had nothing to do whatsoever with the case. He was not fleeing anywhere. There is not a question in my mind that the mother or someone from her family had something to do with the child's passing. I am just waiting for the medical examiner's report and a forensic expert to look at it. One more prime quote from Gallucci before we go. I believe that when the facts of this case come out, there will be justice for Corey, but it's not Mr. Gregor that is going to be the one to hang for it. Between Mario Gallucci and his client, I can't decide which is the bigger dirtbag. Maybe I should create a poll or something. At a court hearing around 9:40 on the morning of Friday, July 16, 2021, Judge Wendell Daniels released 29-year-old Christopher Gregor from the Ocean County Jail. Ocean County Senior Assistant Prosecutor Christine Lento represented the state of New Jersey at the hearing, arguing that Christopher should remain behind bars due to the seriousness of the crime he is accused of committing. Saying probable cause has been well established, Ms. Lento requested Christopher's continued detention, alleging he posed a danger to the community, may attempt to obstruct justice or threaten witnesses, and may fail to appear for his next court hearing. Outside the Ocean County Courthouse in Toms River the morning of the hearing, Brianna and several supporters held signs protesting the possibility of Christopher's release from jail and demanding justice for Corey. They did the same on Wednesday, July 14th, when Christopher's original bail hearing was delayed. At the July 14th hearing, Gallucci requested a 2-day adjournment, saying he needed to review evidentiary matters. Those who watched the live stream of that hearing reported that Christopher grew angry upon learning he would spend at least 2 more days in jail, storming out of the room before the judge formally excused him. As Christopher flounced off in a tizzy like a spoiled brat, Gallucci said to him, "Your dad will explain everything to you." Daddy Dearest, who was a retired New Jersey state trooper, evidently did explain everything to his precious baby boy, because at the July 16th hearing, Christopher was on his best behavior, even as Ms. Lento explained to Judge Daniels that the video footage from March illustrated child abuse and that anyone capable of such brutality clearly poses a risk to the community. Gallucci, however, argued that his client is a Johns Hopkins University graduate with a master's degree in education, only 1 prior contact with the criminal justice system, and no prior warrant history, who voluntarily surrendered to the police when he was charged with child endangerment. Other than time spent obtaining his post-secondary education, he had lived in New Jersey for most of his life, and there was no reason to believe such an upstanding citizen would be a risk to the community or a flight risk. Citing Christopher's despicable behavior, as seen in the video, Judge Daniels nonetheless ordered him released, saying that ordering the defendant held could lead to an appeal that would overturn his decision anyway. In early July, Brianna was told Corey's cause of death was a heart contusion, or basically bruising of the heart muscle, an injury that is typically incurred in a vehicular accident or a fall from a height of at least 2 stories. Such chest trauma can lead to fatal conditions like cardiac arrhythmia, ventricular fibrillation, and sudden cardiac arrest. Whatever force was applied to Corey's chest was essentially equal to that of a car accident. Corey's cause of death was later officially disclosed as blunt force injuries with cardiac and liver contusions with acute inflammation and sepsis. The manner of death was classified as undetermined. We can only hope that once more investigation is done, the coroner will update Corey's manner of death to homicide and murder charges will be filed. Now, Brianna and her family are suffering through their first holiday season without Corey. His maternal grandma, Rebecca, wrote in the Justice for Corey Facebook group, "Each day that goes by with no murder charge is like twisting a knife in my heart." Adding insult to injury, Christopher's parents, David and Carolyn Gregor, have filed harassment charges against Brianna, apparently due to content posted in the Justice for Corey Facebook group. I was glad to hear that Brianna isn't taking this bullshit lying down, instead filing harassment charges against Carolyn for following Brianna around and tearing down the Justice for Corey posters she and her supporters were hanging locally. The current status of the criminal case against Christopher Gregor is temporarily in limbo until an Ocean County grand jury returns with an indictment against him. In the meantime, Brianna and her Justice for Corey supporters spearheaded a toy drive in Corey's honor. The drive collected over 320 toys for children in need who attend Corey's elementary school, because Corey would have wanted all of his friends to have an amazing Christmas. My sources for this episode were Kendall County, Illinois online court records, the Kendall County Jail website, Fox 43, Indiana's My Case portal, DEAR Developing Essential Advocate Restoration for Abused Children group on Facebook, Macomb County, Michigan online court records, the Macomb Daily, the Detroit News, C&G newspapers, the Williamsport Sun Gazette, the Pennsylvania Unified Judicial System web portal, Penn Live Patriot News, Justice for Dante Facebook page, Dante Mullinix's Angel Tree Facebook page, KAKE, Facebook, Tazewell County Circuit Court portal, Illinois Department of Corrections inmate search, Newsday, New York State Unified Court System web portal, 13 News Now, Local 12, News 12 New Jersey, NewJersey.com, New Jersey Advance Media, Jersey Shore Online, Justice for Corey Facebook page, and VineLink. This will be my last episode of 2021. I've decided to take the next 2 weeks off to recharge my mental and emotional batteries and enjoy the holidays with my own kids, who are 17 and 14, so I'm trying to enjoy every possible moment while they still are kids. After no episodes on December 29th and January 5th, I'll be back with a new episode on January 12th, 2022. In the meantime, I'll be checking in on the various social media platforms, and of course, I'll continue honoring the children's birthdays and anniversaries. As always, my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for listening and for helping me keep the memories of these precious kids alive. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, and please never underestimate how much I appreciate every last one of you. To the families enduring the holidays without your children, my heart goes out to you, and my thoughts are always with you. That's it for this week. Join me on January 12th for a new episode. If you like the show, please follow or subscribe to Suffer the Little Children on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast listening app. And please leave me a 5-star rating and a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. Visit the website at sufferthelittlechildrenpod.com, where you can listen to episodes or become a patron for rewards ranging from a shout-out by name on the show to bonus content and exclusive gifts. Follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, and Pinterest at Suffer the Little Children Pod, and on Twitter and TikTok at STLCpod. View photos related to today's episode on Facebook and Instagram. For more stories like the one you heard today, visit sufferthelittlechildrenblog.com. This podcast is researched, written, hosted, edited, and produced by Laine. All music for the show is licensed from audiojungle.net. Email tips, comments, questions, or case suggestions to sufferthelittlechildren.pod@gmail.com. For more information about preventing or reporting child abuse, visit childhelp.org or call your area's child abuse hotline. If you see something, say something. Until next week, bye everyone.